I'd been driving for a rideshare company for a few years by then. And in that time, I'd seen just about every kind of passenger there is. The drunks were the worst, too unpredictable. Some got belligerent, some kept changing the destination mid-trip, and some would ask you to pull over for just a second, disappear into some apartment complex, and never come back. That evening, I was already thinking about wrapping up my shift when a request came through. Pickup from the alley behind a bar. The fare was decent, the distance was solid. Drop-off address way out on the edge of town. I figured it would be my last run and headed over. There was a group of young guys hanging around behind the bar. When I pulled up, two of them grabbed their buddy by the arms and dragged him to the back door. One of the guys leaned in and explained the situation. Their friend had had too much. He needed to get home. Nobody was going to ride along that far with him, but they promised someone was waiting at the building and would meet him at the entrance. I wouldn't have to deal with him. I thought about turning the run down. I didn't love transporting difficult passengers without someone along to manage them. But the guys kept insisting everything was under control. No problems. Easy ride. We pulled out. The guy was slumped against the door, completely gone. The car had that familiar smell, strong booze, cigarettes, and some overpowering cologne. I tried a few times during the drive to ask if he was doing okay. He just made a low sound each time, barely a moan. The farther we got from the city, the darker it got outside. Streetlights thinned out, then disappeared altogether. The road got rough. The tires kept hitting potholes. Wherever this guy lived, it was out in the middle of nowhere. I noticed I'd been driving in complete silence for almost 20 minutes. The passenger had gone fully quiet. The GPS said we'd arrived, but there was nothing around us. The road ran up to a small bridge over a narrow creek. On the right, overgrown brush. On the left, a stretch of abandoned lots gone to weeds. Not a single light in any direction. I thought maybe the address was wrong. They'd said someone would meet him out front. Out front of what? Any apartment buildings were miles back. And who was I going to ask? The passenger wasn't responding. I decided to shake him and find out where exactly he lived. I got out, walked around, opened the rear door on his side. He fell straight out onto the ground. His jacket rolled open, and in the headlights, I saw the stain on his chest. His shirt was soaked through with blood. Through the torn fabric, there was a wound. His eyes were open, but there was nothing behind them. No light, no focus. I reached for his neck. It was cold, no pulse. I had no idea what had happened. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. Told the dispatcher there was a man down with no signs of life. They told me to stay on the line, put my hazards on, and not move the body. The ambulance and police didn't take long to get there, but there was nothing to do for him. He was gone. The officers questioned me. I told them everything exactly as it happened, showed them the ride in the app, the route, the time. They took me in to give a formal statement. 24 hours later, the picture came together. There had been a fight outside the bar that night. Someone in that group had stabbed him with a knife, and then some genius came up with the most convenient solution he could think of. Use the victim's phone to request a ride, prop the body in the backseat, and send it as far away as possible. Maybe they figured the driver would panic and try to handle it himself. Dump the body under a bridge somewhere. It sounds like they didn't know, or didn't care, that the guy was still alive when they loaded him in. They just needed the problem gone and passed it off on someone else. Not the brightest group. They all faced charges. I was a witness in the case. But I still can't shake the thought that this man died in my car. I know for a fact he was still alive for part of that drive. He was moaning, like he was trying to ask for help, but the words wouldn't come. Maybe he could have been saved if I hadn't been driving him out into the dark in the middle of nowhere. That's something I carry now. Part of it is on me. A few years ago, I was working at a small restaurant. We cooked until midnight and didn't lock up until around 1. By that point, the buses to my part of town had long since stopped running, so I always took a rideshare home. By the end of a shift, I'd burned through every last word and smile I had. So I always sat in the back. It was easier not to talk. I'd just stare at my phone and turn into a quiet piece of luggage. I liked it that way. The ride home was the only time in my day when nobody needed anything from me. That night was cold and damp, light rain. When the car pulled up, I climbed in fast and said hello to the driver. He was a plain-looking man, somewhere in middle age, a little gruff. He seemed like the quiet type himself. We started driving. I was already slipping into my usual half-zoned-out state when the driver carefully asked if he could make a quick stop on the way. He needed to drop off some tools for someone. He promised it would be a 2-minute detour, barely out of the way. Honestly, I didn't care. I wasn't in a hurry. I said sure. We turned off onto a side street, and the city lights disappeared immediately. Dark, boxy warehouses slid past the windows, rusty chain-link fences, empty lots, some kind of industrial district. Streetlights were sparse, and half of them weren't even on. There's something inherently unsettling about being driven into the dark by someone you don't know. I was aware of that, but it didn't actually bother me. I wasn't worried. We followed a concrete wall to the far end, where a garage sat with a dull light coming out of it. That's where the driver was headed. He pulled up next to it, hopped out quickly. Just a minute, he sat, went around the back of the car, opened the trunk, grabbed some kind of toolbox, and walked to the garage door. I sat there, listening to the rain tapping on the roof, scrolling through my phone, my eyes starting to close. And then I felt it, the sense that someone was standing just to my right. A shadow fell across the window. I turned my head, and for a second, my brain didn't know how to process what it was seeing. There was a man standing right outside my window. His face was the color of a bruise, grayish blue, like a corpse. The skin on his cheeks sagged loosely off the bone. And his eyes, where his eyes should have been, there were 2 perfectly round black holes. Not dark irises, not closed lids. Holes. Like someone had taken a spoon and scooped everything out. He was standing there with his mouth open, his face maybe an inch from the glass. I froze. My phone slipped off my palm onto the seat. My only thought was, are the doors locked? I couldn't remember if I'd heard the locks click. The eyeless man didn't move. He didn't seem to breathe. He looked like a corpse someone had propped up against the car window. And somehow, even though there was nothing in those sockets, it felt exactly like he was staring at me. A door banged somewhere ahead of me. I flinched. The blue man didn't react at all. I couldn't take it anymore. I reached over, found the door lock by feel, and pushed it down. The click was the loudest sound in the world. The eyeless man just stood there. Then the driver jogged back to the car, right along the passenger side, right past that figure. And I watched him do it, and he just pulled open his door and dropped into the seat and started the engine.
Okay, we're good.
He shifted into drive. I couldn't speak for a moment. The car lurched forward through the puddles. I looked back, and the figure was still standing exactly where it had been. Not following. not moving at all. Then the darkness swallowed it, and we were back on a lit street. Finally, I found my voice. "Did you see him? The man outside my window?" The driver shrugged.
Yeah, some guy was hanging around over there. Homeless, probably.
I swallowed. He didn't have eyes. I mean, literally, just two holes, and his whole face was this bluish gray color, like a dead person. The driver actually turned around for a second, checking, I think, to see if I was drunk.
No eyes? You serious? That's strange.
He said it the way you'd say, "Huh, weird weather today." We drove in silence for a few minutes. Then the driver said, kind of offhand,
You know, people say things about that area, that there's something wrong with it.
He said people had disappeared there. Not just vanished and moved away disappeared. Gone without a trace. Abandoned cars found with the doors hanging open, nothing inside. And there was a story about a man who walked through there on foot one night and lost the ability to speak afterward. Just cried every day until he died.
But I never believed any of that stuff, honestly. I've been driving through there for years, never ran into anything. And I've got a buddy who works out there. He's never seen anything either.
He glanced at me in the mirror.
But here you are telling me about a man with no eyes. Huh.
Then he just switched topics entirely and started talking about music he'd been listening to. Like the supernatural was just something you acknowledge and move on from. That was years ago. I still dream about that face sometimes. It's seared into my brain and it won't let go. The nightmares are always sharp and clear, like I'm actually back in that moment. I'm sitting alone in the back of the cab, rain on the windows, and that blue face is right there on the other side of the glass. I've wondered sometimes whether skepticism is a kind of protection. I've always been a little superstitious. If I forgot something at home and had to go back, I'd always smile at the mirror before leaving again. I'd cross my fingers when a black cat crossed my path. Little things like that. Maybe that's exactly why some horrible thing in a cursed industrial lot decided to press its faceless head against my window. While the driver, who didn't believe in any of it, didn't see a thing. My advice, don't believe in anything. Protect your mind. I've always been terrified of driving. Even after I got my license and made myself do it over and over, there was always this nauseating feeling, like I was holding something fragile and heavy that could shatter at any second and hurt me or someone else. So in the small town where I lived, where buses only came through twice a day and always at the wrong times, I relied heavily on rideshares. The route was always the same. Old County Road past an open field, then along a windbreak of trees to the highway interchange, and from there into the city. The drivers who took pickups from my area were always the same handful of people. Over time, I got to know all of them. The one I rode with most often was a man in his 50s in a gray Honda. He always looked put together, always kept his car clean. It was genuinely pleasant to ride with him. We talked during the trips, everyday stuff, problems with the world, whatever came up. He told me once that I was the most normal passenger he'd had. I appreciated it, though I didn't think I was doing anything special. Was I really so different from everyone else? I got curious and asked what made other passengers difficult. He said that after years of doing this job, he'd learned to read people, and nothing surprised him anymore. He said some were rude or volatile. Some would suddenly get aggressive, even try to start something physical. But you could calm anyone down, he said. You just had to know the right approach. I asked what that looked like, and he said that sometimes a gentle word was enough, but sometimes you had to be firmer. He put it this way: sometimes it's easier to just hit someone once than to deal with the fallout later. I wasn't sure if he was joking. He added that the hardest passengers were aggressive men. Women were easier to bring down, from whatever emotional state they'd worked themselves into. I didn't think much of it at the time. I'd been expecting some interesting story, and got a vague general comment instead. We kept taking rides together for months. I trusted him completely. He was just my driver. Then, one morning, I was scrolling through the news and stopped cold. A rideshare driver in the area had been arrested. Suspected serial killer. The article was thin on details. No name, no photo, no description of the car. Just that the arrest had taken place in the area surrounding my town, and a few lines attributed to the suspect himself. The driver had confessed to fulfilling orders for some kind of demonic cult, delivering human victims for rituals. Among the victims, men, women, elderly people. Something hit me in the chest reading that. I immediately thought of what he'd said about difficult passengers, about how you could calm anyone down, about hitting someone once to avoid the fallout. I opened the local community group on Facebook. People were already arguing and sharing rumors, but nothing concrete. The next day, more information came out. Bodies had been found in the woods not far from my town. More than 20 of them. The exact number still unclear. All of them mutilated. Cut, broken bones, and rusty nails driven into their skulls and eye sockets. I read all of it with a horror that kept getting worse, because I was realizing I might have been riding with whoever did this. Might have. And then it wasn't a might. Someone leaked into the community group that it was the gray Honda with a specific plate number. The same car. The same man. The person I never would have suspected for a single second. Even when he talked about hitting passengers, I'd taken it as an exaggeration. I started trying to understand how a cult could have gotten so deep inside his head that he agreed to deliver people to them. But I think even that interpretation was me trying to preserve the image I had of him. It seemed impossible that the friendly, ordinary man I'd ridden with could have done something like that. Months of investigation passed. No cult members were ever found. He said he didn't know their names or faces. They always wore masks made from animal skulls, he claimed. Their instructions were simple. Bring an old man, bring a young one, bring a woman, bring a man. He swore he couldn't resist their commands, that it was like being hypnotized. He also told investigators he suspected that whatever was behind those masks might not have been human, which means the whole cult might have existed only inside his own head. He may have carried out everything himself, believing he was following orders. Or he was faking the entire thing, playing insane, with no accomplices at all, just inventing the story. There's almost no public information about this case. Law enforcement has kept the details tightly sealed from the media and still hasn't released much of anything. After all of that, I can't make myself request a rideshare. I walk to the highway and catch the bus. I know the odds of it happening again are essentially zero. I know that, but I can't do it anyway. I lost the ability to trust people, especially the ones who make a good first impression.